Okay, if I gave you a few numbers, could you calculate the average of those numbers? I actually suspect that most of you could, in fact, calculate the average because most people, I think, understand the average. It's a term that we use all the time, right? The average of this, the average of that. But could you answer this question involving the average? Well, let's go and take a look at the question. It says the average of 2, 5, and x is 40. What is x equal to? Now, because x is what we call a variable, which just basically represents an unknown value, this is basically kind of like an algebra problem because we have a variable. But even if you didn't understand basic algebra, but you still understood the average, you could still kind of use some common sense and kind of tinker around with this problem to find the answer. So if you want to go ahead and try this, go ahead and put your answer into the comment section. I'm going to show you the right answer in just 1 second. And then we're going to talk about what the average is and how we can use basic algebra to solve this problem very easily. And for those of you out there that are taking any sort of math course that involves algebra, this should be an easy problem for you. This is a very typical type of algebra problem. But before we get started, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is John, and I have been teaching middle and high school math for decades. And it really is my true passion to try to make learning math as easy as possible. So if you need assistance in mathematics, check out my math help program at tcmathacademy.com. You can find a link to that in the description below. And if this video helps you out, don't forget to like and subscribe, as that definitely helps me out. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the answer. And the answer is 113. All right, so how did you do? Well, if you got this right, whether you used algebra or just kind of, maybe a trial and error method, that's still cause for celebration. So let's go and give you a nice little happy face, an A plus, a 100%, and multiple stars so you can brag to your friends and family that indeed you are still a certified professional expert in the area of finding the average and solving basic algebra skills. They'll be like, wow, I always knew you were good in math. And you're going to tell them, yes, my math skills actually improved. I've been watching this guy on YouTube. He's been really helping me out. But anyways, all jokes aside, if you didn't get this right, this is not that difficult. And let's go ahead and get into the solution right now. Okay, so here is our problem. And as I indicated, anytime you have a math problem and then there's a variable involved, like an x, a y, a z, an a, a b, things like that, typically we're talking about an algebra problem. Okay, so that's what algebra is. Algebra uses variables to represent unknown values. So we're going to use algebra to solve this problem, but before we kind of get into that, we need to understand what the average means. Okay, so some of you might be like, yes, I forgot what the average is. No big deal. Let's go and review that right now. All right, so what is the average of these numbers here? So I have 2, 3, and 4. 2, 3, and 4. What is the average? Okay, now, even if you kind of forgot what the average is or how to find it, most of you could still probably kind of just use some common sense in your memory to tell me what the correct answer is. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and take a look at the right answer. The answer is 3. Okay, so excuse me, my voice is kind of cracking up there. So 3 is the average. Now you can see here I have another word called the mean. And you're like, hey, isn't that the average? Well, oftentimes you'll see the word mean. Mean is also the same thing as an average. Now, this kind of topic is what we call, it's part of something called basic statistics and the measure of central tendency. Okay, so along with the mean, you may be interested in finding the mode. You have the mean, median, that's another big one. So mean, median, mode, range, all this stuff. We're talking about basic statistics, just for those of you that are like, oh yes, I need to learn more about this. Matter of fact, if you need to learn more about basic statistics and kind of measure or basically data science, if you will. It's not all that scientific and not all that difficult. Check out my courses. I'll leave the links to them in the description. My pre-algebra, algebra 1, those courses, you'll see I have full chapters on this stuff and much, much more. Okay, but you should know that this word mean is also the average. All right, so how do we find the average? Well, if you look here, these numbers are, we have three numbers and they're written in kind of lowest to highest. So we're kind of thinking, well, isn't the average kind of the middle number? Well, yes and no. Technically, the median is the middle number, but what we need to do is we have to calculate the average by adding up all the numbers that we have. We have three numbers, 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to add them up and we're going to divide that sum by how many numbers we have. So we have 1, 2, 3 numbers. So we're going to take 2 plus 3 plus 4, and then we'll divide that by 3. And when we do that, we're going to get 2 plus 3 is 5, 5 and 4 is 9. So 9 divided by 3 is 3. Okay, so again, that is the mean, that is the average, and that's how we calculate it. But the average or the mean is only one measure of what we call measure of central tendency. Okay, so for those of you that are like, yes, I want to learn more about this stuff. Well, again, we're talking about basic statistics, but that's for another discussion. All right, so this is how we find the average, right? So if you have a bunch of numbers and you want to find the average, we need to add them up and divide by how many numbers. Okay, if you understand that, then that's all you need to really figure out this problem. And let's go ahead and take the next step. And of course, that is to have you subscribe to my YouTube channel very quickly. Make sure to hit that notification button. This really does help me tremendously. Okay, my objective is really try to grow my virtual classroom as big as possible. So many people are interested in math, or maybe, I get so much feedback from people that are upset about a math teacher that they had 40 years ago because some math teacher, and I'll have to say some bad math teacher, said that, hey, you were not good in math, right? Or something happened and someone told you, or you were convinced that, yeah, you can't learn math, you can't learn algebra. That's so detrimental. I'm telling you right now, 99.9999999% of you can be as successful as you want in mathematics. Okay, what you need is clear and understandable instruction and some kind of like, basically someone being a cheerleader for you, right? So that's what I try to do. Anyways, by you subscribing, it really does help me find those people that are interested in math or need help in math. Okay, back to the problem. All right, so here's our problem. Now that we have a great understanding of the average, let's just use some common sense here to think about what the answer could be. All right, now we'll get to the actual solution here in a second, but the average of 2, 5, and x, now x is some number, is 40, okay? So I have 2, I have 5, and then I have some number here, and I know the average is 40. Now, what do you think this number could be, okay? Is it going to be a small number or is it going to be a large number? And you kind of think about that for a second. You might say, well, let's see here. If I had like 7, could I have an average? Does this make sense? The average of these three numbers would be 40. It doesn't make sense, right? So is this number going to be larger? Well, maybe if it was 17, well, the average is 40. Well, you want to kind of use some common sense when you look at a problem. It's very helpful to kind of anticipate what type of answer or what should be a ballpark, value for your answer. Okay. Oftentimes, I've seen this happen for many, many, many years. Students and very good students will do all this math and da 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 da. They'll turn in their answer, and it will make no sense. Okay. So, for example, someone might give me 1 as the answer here. All right. And I'll be like, okay, here's the answer. I did a bunch of work. And then, if you just stop and think about it, this doesn't make any sense. There's no way we can get the average of 2, 5, and 1 to be 40, right? These three numbers, there's no way. So, in other words, when you get your final answer, always ask yourself, in this problem and all math problems, does it make sense? Okay, so just think about that for a second. What do you expect here x is going to be? Well, it's certainly not going to be a small number, right? It's got to be a pretty large number. Okay, so with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into the actual mechanics. And if you don't know basic algebra, what you could do here is what? Well, let's just talk about that real fast. You could just go, well, let's see here, 2, 5, and maybe you want to try like 20. Okay, so you would add these up, divide by 3, and see if the average is 40. Nope. And then just go ahead and maybe try another value, 50, add them up, divide by 3, do you get the average of 40? So you could use a trial and error method, but if you know algebra, this is going to be a very easy problem. And let's go ahead and show you exactly what we need to do. Okay, so we have these numbers, 2, 5, and x. And if we take the average of these numbers, then how do we take the average of these numbers? Again, we're going to add these numbers up. X is a number. Remember, it's a variable, but it's a number. So x is what we're looking for. So if we take 2, 5, and that mystery number x, and we add these up and divide by how many numbers? Well, 1, 2, 3. Okay, the average is 40. Okay, so we're going to use algebra to create an equation. All right, and that's what you want to do is to use the information in the problem to create an equation. All right, when you're dealing with algebra, in order to solve for an unknown value, you want to set up an equation. All right, so the next question here really is, can you solve this basic algebraic equation? Let's go and talk about that right now. All right, now the first thing I want to kind of emphasize here is in algebra, in mathematics, when you have a sum or difference, in other words, when you have a bunch of things you're adding up or subtracting, get in the habit of putting parentheses around those sums and differences. That's a great habit. It will really help you out and it will help you avoid making a very common mistakes in mathematics. Okay, so if you could just kind of remember that for the long run, you'll thank me later. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and first things first is I'm going to put parentheses around this sum. Okay, now they're not there right here when I wrote this equation, but I want you to get in the habit of putting those in. All right, so now that we have these parentheses, let's take a look at what we are dealing with. So we have, this is a fraction, right? So we have a fraction. This whole thing here is the numerator. 3 is the denominator. It is a fraction, and it's equal to 40. But what I want you to do is to think of this as one fraction being equal to another fraction. So you might be able to say, well, that was 40. 40 isn't a fraction. Well, you can think of anything you want as a fraction. Just put it over 1, right? So here is 5. If I want to think of 5 as a fraction, 5 over 1. Here's x. If I want to think of x as a fraction, just put it over 1, okay? All right, so I want you to, observe here what we are dealing with is two equal fractions, okay? So this is a fraction right here, and it's equal to another fraction. Now, this type of situation in mathematics is called a proportion, okay? Now, this isn't the only way to kind of approach this, but it's a great kind of review of this concept. Proportions are tremendously important, and if you recognize that you have a proportion, it's very easy to solve proportion problems. And let me go ahead and show you why. All right, so again, two equal fractions. Let's take two equal fractions, something like this. I have 1/2. Well, that's equal to this fraction 4 over 8, right? Well, when you have two equal fractions, by definition, what we call a proportion, what is true is something called the cross product, okay? In other words, if we cross multiply 2 times 4, this is 8, and that's going to be equal to 8 times 1, which is 8, okay? So when you have a proportion, the cross product is always true, okay? So here, although I have all this kind of algebraic stuff here, I can still use the cross product. I have one fraction equal to another fraction to solve this problem, okay? All right, so let's go and do that now. So I'm going to take 1, I want to multiply it by this sum right here. And so 1 times 2 plus 5 plus x is going to be 2 plus 5 plus x. And then I have 3 times 40, which of course is 120. All right, so I clear the fractions. Now some of you might be saying, hey, Mr. YouTube Math Man, can't you just clear the fractions by multiplying everything by 3? Yes, of course you could do that. This is also what we call a rational equation. But I wanted to bring up proportions because that's very important. And when you see equations that are two equal fractions, you can always use the cross product to solve. All right, so here is our lovely equation. We have 2 plus 5 plus x is equal to 120. So how do we solve this? Well, let's first add 2 and 5. So 2 and 5 is 7. 7 plus x is 120. And to solve for x, all we need to do is subtract 7 from both sides of the equation. And we want to write our work just like this. And then we'll add down in a column manner. So 7 minus 7 is 0. X plus nothing is x. And 120 minus 7 is 113. Okay, so looking at our answer, 113, it makes sense, right? Remember, we anticipated a bigger number than 2 and 5. We didn't know which number, but this kind of passes the common sense test. And we're like, all right, this makes sense, but how can we be sure about our answer? Well, you can always check your solution, back into the original problem. Okay, so here is the original problem here. So the average of 2, 5, and x, well, if x is 113, we're going to be saying the average of 2, 5, and 113 is 40. Okay, well, let's go ahead and check that. 2, 5, and 113. We'll find the average, so 2 plus 5 plus 113 divided by 3, right? Well, 2 and 5 and 113 is 120. 120 divided by 3 is indeed 40. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, especially for those of you out there that are math students, never, ever, ever, ever turn in your tests, quizzes, exams early. Okay, that is like the worst thing you can do. And I used to, get really frustrated with students, especially really strong students. They're like, "Hey, look at me, Mr. Math teacher. I did my 1 hour exam in 15 minutes," and everyone's looking at that person like, "Wow, that person's a genius." Well, no, even if they did that right, never do that. Never ever do that. Now, some of you might say, "Well, I want to finish so I can move on. Check my phone, my text messages, my social media, or maybe my homework." That's the worst thing you can do, okay? Not only in math class, in any situation, you want to use that extra time to look for errors, okay? I make errors in mathematics. You're going to make errors. Even if you don't think you made an error, you need to kind of go back and double check your work, check your solutions. You have to be a little bit, for lack of a better word, paranoid. You have to be like, wow, I think maybe, hopefully I didn't make a mistake. And you'll be surprised that you're going to find these little errors and you can correct these before you turn in your test. So never ever do that. And again, I'm just sharing all the things that I've seen throughout many decades. And of course, I've made all these errors myself. All right, so with that being said, I definitely wish you all the best in your mathematics adventures. Thank you for your time and have a great day.